Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
You're on our YouTube channel. Subscribe to this channel. Give this video a like.
Check out our podcast also below in the description. Talking a lot of football.
Yep.
Subscribe right now.
And a lot of George Kittle, the man who signed with the 49ers. We've talked about Kittle a lot. We'll get into kind of all the money of it. Who won? Did they both win? Did only one of them win? Whatever. But the bottom line, John, is you and I talked a lot about how big of a story this would be if George Kittle held out. And, you know, Tom Brady's throwing passes in Tampa, and Dak, for the moment, that got resolved in Dallas. Not fully resolved, but at least we know what's happening there. This was going to be one of the biggest stories in the league if George Kittle, a superstar, one of the best, if not the best player on a Super Bowl contender, held out. He showed up, COVID camp, he arrived, and now he's got a deal.
Yeah, I think the Niners kind of do it again, get a player under contract. When they want a guy under contract, they get it done. It's just that simple. They've done it for years with the Patrick Willises, the Joe Staleys, the Navarro Bowmans, the Frank Gores, the Vernon Davises. And I think George Kittle just goes right in that category. Now, financially, I think we all knew this was going to be a little complicated, and we have talked about this over and over and over again. But the simple fact is, and we'll get into the money here in a little bit, is that he's going to be a 49er for the prime of his career. And I mean, hell, I'd call the last couple of years the prime of his career. Like, George hit the prime pretty fast. I was like, damn, this guy's pretty good. Really good. I mean, he became the best tight end in football kind of by his second year in the league. For a fifth-round pick, it's kind of unheard of. I saw this thing got retweeted into my timeline. This was a long time ago, but the year that Richard Sherman went on with Skip Bayless was after his second year in the league, when they were arguing over who's the best corner in the league.
It does not feel that way, does it?
He was an all-pro by the second year in his career. And I think George Kittle had that just when it happens right with Nick Bosa or Khalil Mack or Aaron Donald or Odell Beckham or whoever. It's like, yeah, the guy was a top 15 pick. Kyler Murray, all these guys are elite. When it happens with a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick and they dominate like this, it comes at you fast. And on the flip side, their contracts are shorter, right? They're only 4 years. There's no 5th-year option. It can become, like you've seen with Dak Prescott, it becomes a lot more complicated quickly, right? Because after the 3rd year, you're at an impasse. It's like, we're going to pay this guy. What are we going to do? Is he going to hold out? Last year, Michael Thomas did. It's like, time to pay me. I've established who I am. Now, you got to be really good at the later round value of a pick. And I think George Kittle, I'd say him and Michael Thomas, just in recent memory, are the guys that are like, yeah, is that the guy the best player in the league? If you're watching a given game when Michael Thomas has 20 catches or George runs your guys over and dominates the line of scrimmage and scores a touchdown, you go, it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, this is partly just the structure of the NFL, but, we're talking about a guy who just signed a 5-year contract, and this is kind of, I think, your point on Richard, after his 3rd year in the NFL, and it really only took him 2 years to become one of the best players in the league, right? I mean, if you had said, ignore the structure of how the NFL works, he got extended after his 2nd year, you'd go, well, I mean, he's one of the best players in the NFL, right? So we've known this he's been proving it now for 2 years. And the other part of this is just, this is a team that is trying to win the Super Bowl right now this year. Right now. This is it. I don't know what's going to happen in 2021, but I know right now this year, this team's trying to win the Super Bowl. And having a guy holding out or having a guy maybe not holding out but there, and this is just hanging over your head at a time when he's not only your 1 or 2 best player, I'd say your best player, he's also the face of your franchise, face of a sport. I mean, he has proven in 3 years, John, to be the perfect package. Leader in your locker room, face of your franchise.
High character,
generational talent.
Lovable to the fans. Beloved.
Can do, unique.
Fits the scheme.
Your coach loves to run the ball. He can block. Your coach loves to throw it to him. He can catch. I mean, it doesn't get any easier than this, right?
No, it really doesn't. And I mean, it does in terms of just the negotiating on Georgia's side,
just
being the
understanding
position.
whether or not you want the guy.
Yeah, but I just, you don't have a choice. Like, you have to part of the reason Dak Prescott, let's just be real, is not under contract for a long time, because there are people in that building go, is this guy really worth it? And in fairness, how would you not ask that question? There is no one in the 49ers building who just goes, is George Kittle worth a long-term contract? That would say no. Now, then there's the next step, like what are the dollars, what's his position? But just the most basic question, when you have Aaron Donald on your team, do you want to keep this Michael Thomas? That was what was so crazy about Khalil Mack. You just go, do you want George Kittle in the peak of his powers on your team? The answer is very fucking simple. It's yes. And they answered it pretty quickly. Now, I wonder if this would have been done a little quicker in non-corona times, right? Because we're August 13th, they haven't had a practice. Typically, they would have started practicing like either August 1st or July 31st. Media would have been there. It would have been kind of a zoo, the George Kittle situation. And maybe because there wasn't that much urgency, they didn't do it. Now, maybe this is one of the reasons they get it done. Pads are about to come on, and anytime, even in practice, there's an inherent risk. Like George is like, listen, I got no problem showing up, because one thing our buddy Mike Tannenbaum tweeted a while ago, get ready for hold-ins, where you show up, but you don't actually practice. Well, they haven't really had practice yet. But when the pads come on, what if George goes, it's not worth it for me to run into Nick Bosa the wrong way and put myself in a weird situation? Maybe that guy was the deadline in a weird way. Like, we got to get this done before we start hitting in camp. Because there are, just gigantic risks in the sport of football when you put on pads that aren't even involved in a game. You and I have been at several training camp practices in our life. Raiders, Niners, I was at Eagles practice where guys go, Fresno State, a player goes down and the whole fucking place stops, right?
Yep.
It's in my sports watching life, we've all been to basketball, NBA games, major league games. That's a unique experience, right? Being at a practice when a guy goes down and the whole place goes silent. Every player stops, everyone surrounds the guy, and the cart comes out. In a game, because the game just restarts and practice ultimately restarts, but I wouldn't you say also one of the first reactions in that scenario is, who is it? Right?
Yeah.
Who is it?
Yeah.
And last year it was Nick Bosa's down, right? I remember being at a practice when, now this guy turned out to not be very good, but they had just drafted him in I think the second round. LaMichael James went down and he was just laying there and you're like, Chris Culliver. You just, what? Huh? And it's jolting. I would say there would be no more, maybe Jimmy Garoppolo because he's a quarterback. If George, George couldn't put himself in that situation given what he's meant to the team. Like, he deserved to be paid before the risk of injury came in, right?
Yeah.
So they just got it done.
Well, maybe that's part of the deal. When you want to get something done, the deadline is the thing that accelerates it, either the season beginning or getting pads on or whatever. I also think,
because that's always the deadline with a holdout, right? Week 1. Like, you want that guy by Sunday leading into week 1, historically.
You start missing games, then it's about either you're going to get everything you want or we just might not Le'Veon Bell see you again.
Yeah. Well, it depends if you're winning or losing, because remember Cam Chancellor held out, and the Seattle started like 0-2, and they're like, oh, shit. They paid him. But sometimes it goes the other way.
Sometimes you find out you got another running back.
Le'Veon's a good example.
Yeah. All right.
James Conner? Oh, you're not bad.
Yeah. I also think for the 49ers perspective, here's a guy who plays
Ross Dwelly? Yeah, you're not Kittle.
Yeah, Jordan Reed? Complimentary. These are all complimentary. Yeah. But nobody is Kittle. That's the other part of this is Le'Veon Bell plays a position where there's other guys that running backs, there's a bunch of them, right? If George Kittle was the 49ers star running back, he would not have gotten a contract today.
No.
You know?
Well, he probably would have had to hold out if he was the equivalent, because he would have been like Saquon Barkley on this team, right? And you couldn't have shown up. It would have been a disaster.
You're right. He would have been the Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, it would have been ugly.
But I think from their perspective too, getting it done now, 5-year contract, guy that plays physically, I would want that 5 years to start as early as possible if I'm the 49ers.
Yes. 100%. Because technically it's an extension, right? Because he still is under contract for this year.
Right.
So I think they look at it, we got this guy who's in his mid-20s under contract, the best years of his career. Now, it might not go perfectly. I mean, that's the risky part about the NFL. Because if this was the equivalent of basketball, he'd be like Giannis, and you couldn't sleep any better at night. In football, there's just an inherent risk with signing guys to guaranteed money, and that's just the reality of the sport. But if you are going to sign, whenever you sign your best player, you got to feel pretty good about it. And so he's under contract for as long as they want to, for up to 6 years if they want to keep him, right? This year and then 5 more.
Right. It's like me taking Koepka in DraftKings, John, at the Wyndham. It's like I'll just bet on the best guy, and if he finishes T66, then he finishes T66. This guy is not finishing T66 though.
No chance.
So we can get into some of the money as well. We've taken our guesses.